Well, 78, 86, 80, 82. This is when I was, before I was making planets. I actually, along with this work, I was making, right from the very beginning, when I started in 71, I started to make wine goblets because I actually, I told you that I thought that that was the most difficult thing that anyone could do in glass. And so, and I wanted to, well, I did this floral work, and I did it over a number of years. And so these are those pieces. There were some interesting things that I learned. One is that with this vase in particular, I started to I had learned that I couldn't do Tiffany iridescence. If I did, it didn't ever really work, or it looked like Tiffany glass. It wasn't mine. But I did discover that you could iridize the inside of a piece. Tiffany never did that. It's iridescent on the inside, but it changes the light slightly. And so this piece was pretty profound because it's got the flowers on it, and it's got the iridescent inside. The other thing with flowers that I started to do was learn about how you can create a sense of depth in glass. That I'd put one flower in, and then I'd take a gather of clear glass over that, and then put another flower on top of it. So you begin to sense that there's a feeling of depth. And then with this piece, these three pieces, that was after I had visited the nuclear power plant, and I started to try to develop that Cherenkov blue radiation color. And the way I tried to achieve it was by melting silver in my glass. And so the backgrounds on all of these, this paperweight and these two vases, has silver melted. And it creates this sort of night sky effect that I really liked a lot. And so you've sort of got this implausible thing with flowers brightly lit and a dark night sky in the background. But I like that surreal sort of feeling to these pieces. And I also started experimenting with other kinds of silver glass. It's silver glass that I used for the vines and the stems of these flowers. And probably the oldest piece here is this little vase up here that's iridescent. And that is a very simple flower, and but I was trying to get that iridescent Tiffany-like effect. And ironically, that piece was in a show in a gallery in Greenwich, Connecticut, in whatever year it was made. And the gallery had this huge poster, and they had this picture of this little vase, but it looked like it was, 10 feet tall. And so it never sold in the gallery because people would come in wanting the big vase, and it turned out to be this big. And I was so pleased when it didn't sell that I kept it. Actually, a lot of the pieces in this show are mine. And the reason is they were kept for most of what I made was always sold because you guys have probably never done this, but I have spent most of my life living hand to mouth, so I'd get money and have to spend it right away. And so I'd make things and they'd immediately go. And I wouldn't always know where they'd gone to. We did have, some of these pieces are borrowed from other collections, but I did start to I tried to keep one piece a year. And sometimes it was a piece that had a story, sometimes it was a piece that I thought was some new direction that I was going. And so a lot of these pieces are from my collection, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's really cardboard boxes in the attic. And so I stopped making flower vases eventually just because I felt like they really weren't my work. I talked a little bit about learning the Italian techniques, and these are a couple of pieces that I made during that phase where I was making thin lines of color with thick glass. And again, it was a wonderful great techniques to learn, but I didn't feel that I could do anything different or new with this work. If you go to Murano, you will see glass that's like this, only better executed. And so I stopped doing that. I also wanted to learn how to do, well, just to use clear glass in the best way that I could. One thing, on the back, or on the bottom side of this cast sculpture, and on the back side of this is a grid. I took a machine course at a local community college, learning how to use milling machines and lathes and metalworking equipment. And so it was great for me because I learned how to make my own tools, my own blowpipes, and using a milling machine, I started to make grids out of brass plates, and I could mold the glass against the brass plates. And I started, so the exterior on this little vase has sort of an indented pattern. And also over there are perfume bottles that use different grids that I've made on a milling machine. And I used the metal to help shape the glass. But I made a discovery along the way, and this is a cool discovery, that if you gather clear glass over one of these grids, it traps air bubbles. And it was like, oh my goodness, that's so cool. And I also, I can clearly remember going home for Thanksgiving and my mother getting me to put flowers in a vase. And she gave me a thing she called a frog. And it's this little bed of nails, you know? And I took one look at that frog and just thought, I think I know what I could do with that. And I stole her frog. And I don't know if she ever found out what happened to it, but I came home with it, and if you push the frog up against molten glass, it leaves tiny little indentations. And so you can trap rows of air bubbles. Actually, the frog in the end didn't work very well because the nails would get too hot and stick to the glass. But I, with my milling machine, made the equivalent of a frog that works better. So,
what's a milling machine?
A milling machine is it's a thing that it can cut and manipulate steel or brass or aluminum, and they have cutters in it. It's giant. These are giant machines that they use to create. They are the machines that can be used to make all other machines, essentially.
Oh, hit a button and it cuts it.
Yeah, that's certainly one type of machine thing. There are others that use rotary cutters, and you can just cut a 10,000th of an inch of steel off the surface, or change the shape, or change the radius, or make a gear. You can make gears with these machines. There's no end to what you can do if you're patient, which isn't one of my strong points. So anyway, I started trapping air bubbles. The problem with air bubbles is that glass makers have trapped air bubbles for 1,000 years. And I thought I was really onto something with these pieces. These are laser optics. And what I did was I got a helium neon laser, and I'd shine laser light into these pieces, and the grid on the outside would change where the laser light shone. And if we were in a darkened room, if I put a laser against this, actually all the walls and the ceiling would light up with these amazing patterns. They're absolutely stunning. There's just one hitch, and that is that if you show these in a gallery, you're not, these lasers tend to remove a lot of rods and cones in your eyes. And so I never was able to display any of the laser optic pieces because of fear of blinding people.
Safety glasses.
But it would be a great sight. The last thing you saw would be beautiful. So galleries were understandably reticent to show this work, and though the Corning Museum collected one piece, but at any rate, so this is kind of another phase. It's so weird because you know how music, sometimes you'll be at the beach one summer and there'll be a certain song playing and you'll remember it years later, that you associate that song with whatever you're doing and you were 18 or you were driving somewhere or whatever. You've got one. You've got a good one, yeah. And all of these pieces bring back, 30 or nearly 40 years of little memories kind of come zooming through my my now defunct brain. And when I started to iridize the inside of my flower vases, I thought I was really onto something. And I actually still occasionally make these iridescent color vases. They're simply an exercise in color and form. I can make these quickly. They don't require that I think about what kind of depth, what kind of feeling or mood I'm trying to create, what kind of visual things I'm trying to do inside the piece. All it is, I'm playing with form and with color. And I like these. It's glass, and you can see it's glass, but I like the fact that the iridescence on the inside breaks up the color. And the coolest thing about this is that for a number of years in the 90s, I sold these pieces to Tiffany in New York City and Milan and Tokyo. So Tiffany and Company sold these as their in their gallery. And for a while, they were my biggest client. I'm not sure it's art really, but they were fun to make. And I've essentially, every once in a while, I'll make them maybe once every couple of years now. But these were bread and butter pieces for a number of years. Let's go this way. We're going back in time a little bit to the time when I was trying to develop something new, something that Frederick Carter and Ed Steuben and Tiffany and the others had not done. So I tried putting these vases into something called an optic mold, which just gives it the little ribs, and then trying to make it iridescent. And I tried threading color on the side of a vase and then iridizing the inside. But actually, this kind of threading work has been done. You can look in glass pieces made in Tutankhamun's tomb in Egypt, and that was a long time ago. But it's still this thread or pattern. And it's something that's been done for a long, long time. And these are sort of little offshoots of iridescent pieces, trying to do something different, trying to push this material a little bit. These are wine goblets. These are incredibly difficult to do. I made thousands of these goblets in the years that I did them. And I think they're easier to do if you use molds. I didn't want to use any molds or any forming devices at all. So every single one's handmade. And then at the end of a week of making them, we try to line them up like soldiers from the tallest to the shortest and just see if there were any matches, any pairs or larger sets. When I first started doing these, I have a photograph of me at a craft fair with like one red goblet and another red goblet and another red goblet, and they were all different sizes. But I remember selling these, and people would walk up to me and I'd go, "This is a perfect match set of ruby goblets." And they're just crazy sizes.
That's in now though.
But for me, the fact that they were all the same color and they all had sort of the same shape made them a perfect match set. And I felt it so strongly in the soul of my being, that this was a perfect match set that, I just said it. And another life lesson that if you really are convinced about something, you can sometimes fool people amazingly. But I mean, I wasn't trying to fool anybody, but that people would actually believe me that it was a match set, and they would buy it. I used to sell them for $4 each.
I wish I could
And-
want one for $4.
And the last, if you could find them occasionally on eBay or Sotheby's or you know, the auction places, and they sell for between $300 and $600 a piece now. It's just crazy money. So and these goblets, the ones up on the top here, are called New Mexico goblets. Those were the ones that guy had bought and who saw me in the post office. Who
Said they were stars.
right?
Yeah.
And I haven't seen him for a while, so I don't know.
What did the ones that you sold to Rosalind Carter?
They were called cloud goblets, and they were on clear glass with the same silver. So they were very interesting because they looked yellow in normal light when the goblet was empty, but if you put red wine in it, it would turn blue. Because right now, when you see clear glass, looking around for a piece that's that way, but if I had melted silver on clear glass and you see light coming, transmitted light through it, it appears yellow. But wine would prevent transmitted light from going through, and then you see the reflected light, which is blue. And so it was this cute little other thing. It's that dichroic two-color function of glass is something that I use a lot. So I started making tumblers and wine goblets, and they really helped me survive until about 1975. That's what I did. I mean, mostly wine goblets, with occasionally making vases and other stuff. But in 1975, I realized that while I was living at my grandfather's house, my grandfather died. He had left the house to my uncle. My uncle really didn't want me there. And I didn't really want to be there either. But it was really hand to mouth. I was making these goblets as fast and as hard as I could, selling them for $4 a piece, and not getting ahead at all. But I'd been to college and I'd taken an economics course. And it was well known that if you double the price, that maybe you'd sell half as many. And if you triple the price, you'd sell a third as many. And I thought that was a rigid kind of scale. And so I went basically from a $4 or $5 price to $50 because I wanted to make way less goblets. So suddenly by 1976, I was charging $50 a piece for goblets. And the weirdest thing happened. I was totally sick of making them. I didn't want to do them anymore. I wanted to make a tenth as many. But in fact, I took probably 5 times more orders for goblets at $50 a piece than I did at $4 a piece. And suddenly, I could learn to love making goblets at $50 a piece because it allowed me to buy my farm where I'm living now. And I still stopped. In '87, I stopped completely. I haven't made goblets since then. But I'm not sure what I learned in that life lesson, but suddenly they seemed to be more valuable to people. When I sold them, and $50 was really a much better price. I mean, in the end, it was difficult to make them even at that price, given the cost of energy and that kind of thing. Anyway, so I made goblets, and then I started to make New Mexico vases that were like the goblets, and so there's a whole selection of them here. New Mexico vases and platters, and the platters are really meant to be what it's like to lie out on a perfect summer night on your picnic table and just stare up at the sky. These are red New Mexico pieces that have copper added to the silver. And this is that little plate that I showed you a photograph of. I got a grant, actually, from the Massachusetts Council on the Arts and Humanities in the 80s, early 80s. And they gave me $5,000, which is just a huge amount of money. And what it allowed me to do, though, was melt a different silver glass every week for a year. And during that time, I melted that little color plate, only I didn't keep track of exactly what the chemistry was, and I never could repeat it. Never got it back. Couldn't figure it out. And so that's always frustrated me that I never could do it. Until the last few months when I've just decided that I was going to try to figure it out. And that's what I've been doing.
Maybe I'm the only one who doesn't know this, but why is it called New Mexico?
Oh, why is my glass called New Mexico? I'm sorry. There's actually a perfectly semi-logical explanation. When I first started doing it, I was melting, silver and manganese and cobalt and sometimes iron and a bunch of other chemistry to make that glass, to make that blue. But a friend I'd never been to New Mexico, but a friend had told me how amazing it was to camp out in the desert and have 1,000,000 stars overhead, and just how beautiful the sky was in New Mexico. Living in Connecticut and Massachusetts, I would never understand. And so the idea was just to describe the sky in New Mexico. And so at one point it was New Mexico sky, and then it just got shortened to New Mexico. And it's completely, it's nonsensical unless you sort of know that.
Well, now that I know the story, it makes a lot
I
of
eventually
sense.
did get to go to New Mexico, but I've never camped out in the desert, just for one reason or another. So, but walking between my studio and my home in the middle of the night, I think there are pretty nice skies in New England too. Here are the tektite pieces that I described. The exterior glass is the same formula as the tektite meteorites from outer space. This glass is not meant to be blown. It is the most cantankerous stuff. It's inhomogeneous. It's lumpy. It doesn't flow. It doesn't really drip. It kind of sits there, and it's actually, I like it a lot. I like working with it a lot because it has a mind of its own, and you can only shape it to a certain extent. And so I try to do something like the bowl of the goblet, or in this case, this is a tektite portal. It has a little solid thing of glass, but you can kind of peer into that and see another universe inside. And that, so I work very hard on the part that I can control, but then I add the meteorite glass, and it has a mind of its own, and so I feel it's a kind of collaborative effort that the glass has a mind of its own in this case. So the inside of these pieces, sometimes I'll do the blue New Mexico glass. Sometimes it's iridescent. And this gave me suddenly a way to use the iridescent glass that I'd spent so much time trying to figure out how to do. It gave me a new way to use it. And so I like these pieces for their conceptual, I like that they're gnarly, and I love the contrast between the exterior glass and the outside, but I like the concept that these are pieces that could have been floating out and hurtling through space for millions of years before they arrived here. And the inside is the story of their travels, perhaps. Saturn pieces are really the most difficult thing that you can make in glass. I tried to attempt these. I actually made 99 of these that failed before I got the first one that worked. And I know that because I did actually keep records. Actually, to be a glass blower, you have to be remarkably stubborn. If you've got an idea of what you want to do, then you really have to keep at it for a while. So what was difficult about this is that I had to make it's an Italian technique that was developed in the 9th century AD. It's called encolmo, where you take two bubbles of glass and put them together so that it's clear on the inside and color on the outside. And then, while this was on the blowpipe, it was sort of a basketball shape. And then I had to heat up the very bottom of this piece and open up a hole in the bottom of this. So there's a blowpipe here, a basketball shape, a hole in the bottom, and then that hole has to be opened to a specific size. And then I have to give that to one of my apprentices to keep warm. So they go back and forth to the glory hole to keep it hot. And then I had to go and make a planet on another bench. I finish my planet, we take a caliper and measure how big the planet is around, and then make sure that the planet is the same size as the hole. And then you have to get both things perfectly hot. And when I say hot, I mean really hot. So they're slumping there. You have to turn them constantly. So both pieces have to turn at once, and then you have to bring them together at just the right moment, and to be even and to touch. And then you push the planet in and pull it back out to make sure it adheres correctly. And then you break it off the blowpipe on the basketball side. And now the planet is held. Okay? And break it off. And now I've got the planet holding it at the bottom, and I have to heat up the top and get it super hot. Take a shear and cut the edge. So now I've got this lump on the bottom with this basketball shape. I start to open up the top as it turns. And eventually I have to get it so hot that it opens up into the Saturn ring. What's difficult is that if it gets too hot, then the planet takes this shape. It's no longer round, it looks like this. And then in cooling, I'm trying to cool something that's 1/4 of an inch thick with something that's this thick, and that they don't like each other that much. And so they part company sometimes quite violently. And so this has survived. This is the largest one I've ever done. And I could probably count on 2 hands the total number of solders I've ever made.
And the one down there that's flat on the top, did that start out as a planet and you cut it off?
Well, actually, it's a little more complicated. That started out as a bowl. I made a bowl out of it was New Mexico blue. And then I built a stainless steel box out of 3/8 inch stainless steel, welded it together, and then filled that box with sand. I put that whole box inside a kiln, a ceramic kiln. Heated the whole, so there's a bowl suspended in sand. So there's sand on the outside of the bowl, and a steel box holding the sand together inside the kiln with huge elements. And I heated that bowl up for about a week to get it up to 1,000 degrees. And then I started, and I made essentially a planet, but a planet starting from the inside out. So I took several gathers of clear glass and then melted a little sphere on the end of that, and then did all the layers. And the final gather, I took a huge gather of clear glass, melted silver on it, and we opened up the door of the kiln, and I went, whoa, and put it all in. And then I had to stand there above this kiln. We had actually heated up the kiln to 2,000 degrees at that point, so it's cooking. And I have to stand there for quite a while, and there's people holding wood, and the wood's smoking, it's this big mess. And then I had to reach down and squeeze the joint between the glass and the blowpipe to just propagate a little crack, and then break it off. And then got out, closed the door, and then we heated the kiln. We heated actually the kiln up to 2,100 degrees, or actually it may have even gone up to 2,300, but at any rate, it's smooth at the top. And then a month later, it had cooled down enough, we took it out and then ground and polished the top and put that lens in the side. And so if you feel the outside of that, and one of the guards doesn't hit you over the head with a stick, then you feel the sand surface. It's kind of rough. Okay, so this room brings us to the planet making, which started in 1976 when I moved to Shelburne Falls. I started making planets for those 8th graders. I really owe that to the town that I live in and all those kids coming. The planets that I started to make are these little ones right there. That's That's probably one of the very first ones. This little planet actually has gold leaf on it. That's what looks sort of, has that brass color. It's actually gold leaf. I use every glass technique there is making these things. I'll melt a platinum leaf, palladium, copper, gold, silver leaf, but I also melt metallic silver and melt it to make the blue colors. I also make cane that I make ahead of time that I melt inside these little things. And so from 76 to 77, 78, 79, 81, till about 82, I made planets that were only to be given away. I never considered these things to be anything that was saleable. I just never, I thought, who would buy a thing like that? It's small. I mean, they're really cool, but why would I sell something? And they also became, when kids would come, I'd always give them, I made enough of them, so I'd give planets to kids, and we started, okay, Shelburne Falls, Halloween is a big event, sort of, except I live out in the sticks, and for years, one kid, or possibly two, would come to my door. And so I started to give, a candy bar, UNICEF money, and then I started giving kids a planet. So year one, we had the normal number, 1 or 2 kids. Year 2, there must have been 15. Year 3, it got to 30. And now we dependably have 60 or 80 to 100 kids come to my door at Halloween, although it is a little disappointing, though not all that surprising, that sometimes the next morning there'll be planets on eBay being sold. These planets, and we always put a skull and crossbones on the bottom to sign them, and so it'll say, this planet, you cannot buy this planet. It's not sold. It had to be given by Josh Simpson, and they'll get huge amounts of money for these things. And, oh dear.
Is that the size of the planet that you hide?
I hide actually all sizes of planets. The Alvin deep sea diving submarine at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution goes to all the oceans of the world, and they have taken some really big planets down to the bottom and put them next to volcanoes or thermal vents. And so I have a great picture of Alvin with a pretty large planet in its basket, and then a nice picture of a planet at 3,000 meters below the ocean surface in the Azores.
I was just there. I would have found it.
I think those planets are going to stay hidden for
Yeah.
a pretty long time, but others are meant to be just hidden in plain sight, and hopefully somebody from a different walk of life or different world will discover them. So I started with the little ones, and then I kept wanting to add more and more complexity to them, to make them to give them more depth, more things to look at, more challenge, I guess. So they started to get bigger and bigger, and I started mixing different chemistry. The copper makes the reddish terracotta colors, and I started doing more and more complicated cane inside of them, culminating with this 100-pound planet. And I mean, these big ones, I'm not actually sure if I'm really going to make any more of those. They're breaking a rib and making the large one made me realize how dangerous it actually is, that it's just a miracle that nobody's been really seriously injured. Actually, the way I really started making much bigger planets was when I was invited by Moritex Corporation, a Japanese corporation. They challenged me to make the biggest planet that I possibly could. And it was awesome because they paid for my ticket to Japan, and they paid for a ticket for the planet to sit next to me. The planet sat in the cargo hold. My wife got the ticket. So Katie and I went to Japan, and they had this huge ceremony. They had Buddhist monks, opening casks of wine and these beautiful wooden wine sake containers, and they dedicated this building, and then there were TV crews there, and it turned out they asked other glassblowers to make the largest sphere that they could. And so in the end, they took the two biggest ones and they were under curtains, and they pulled them up in front of the TV cameras, and they had calipers, and they measured them. They were both exactly the same size. They were 8 inches in diameter. And one was made by Jim Lundberg, and who is actually now has died. And the other one was mine. His was hollow, and so I actually sort of won the contest because mine was solid and heavier. But I didn't even know it was a contest. And flying home, I thought, you know, if I knew this was a contest, I could have done a lot better. You know? And so the day that I came back home from Japan, I started planning to make a larger planet. And the very next one I made was like 10 inches in diameter, and ended up in the Clinton White House for 7 of the 8 years.
How big is the biggest one you have there?
That probably is 13 inches or so in diameter. It probably weighs 100 and something pounds. The heaviest one I've ever done was 137 pounds. That wasn't successful. I still have that one. It's just ugly. And so.
Because the megaplanets are so dense and so complicated, tell us a little bit about how you choreograph all the materials and.
Well, that's exactly the right word. A lot of people have described what we do as a dance. I like to think of it as a bunch of football players trying to do ballet. You know, because you need strength to do this, and I mean, even the women in my studio are pretty macho, but you do need to work. Glass demands that you work with it with a kind of grace and flowing energy, that because it is a liquid. If you're just too sudden with it, it's going to screw up. And so we do making the biggest planets. We multiple times ran through all the moves that we thought we were going to do. And who was going to be where, and who was going to do what, and that works up to a point, but unforeseen things happen all the time. In making the very first time we ever tried one of the big planets, I had made a bar that was meant to help guy on either side would pick up. I'd put my blowpipe up against this bar, and they could lift up the end, because when it gets to be 100 pounds, I can no longer, it's just too much weight. I can lift it for a moment or two, but not really effectively. And so the idea was these two guys would pick it up, and then I would be able to just turn it like this. Well, when they went to pick it up, the bar just folded. It was this bar that I'd made years before, and I'd never had any problem with it, but the weight was too much, and so we had to work on the fly, and that's a little complicated. So it is, but the other thing is that my team, we've worked together for years. And as I said, with making the giant planet, I had people come back who had not worked with me also for years, but they had been my apprentices, and we fit in. It was like they'd never been gone. They knew exactly what to do, and they were all pretty skilled, and so they knew sort of where they wanted to be, or they could see that there was a problem that was coming up, and they'd deal with it before it really got out of hand some of the time.
And so how do you plot out a path to execute your vision of these? And like all the materials, do you have them laid out, and do you spend a lot of time thinking about and organizing each layer or addition?
Yeah, exactly. Though often it's done, for more complicated pieces, it's done the night before or the day before, and we might spend a whole day just setting up. And actually, my wife and I are both pilots. We both fly airplanes, and to do aerobatic flights, it's amazing to talk with professionals, because you you can see them. They close their eyes, and sometimes they'll visualize it with a hand, but we're going to do this, and we fall off this way, and fly. That, you know, and you could see them move their body through the motions of doing, you know, these different sorts of maneuvers, going upside down or whatever they're about to do. And in a way, we do that in glass. Sometimes sometimes I'll do this. I'll just sit down and kind of either close my eyes or just kind of stare into space while I think about all the moves that it's going to take to do what we're going to do. And but it's just choreography. I mean, it's planning it out and making sure. And where it gets difficult is when something happens that you don't plan for, or something looks so interesting and so cool that you have to go down a different path than I originally intended. Basically, I do this because I'm having a good time. I love doing this. This is what I enjoy doing. It is actually, it's someday I hope that all of you get to try this. It's insanely frustrating to do. You take this crazy hot glass out of a furnace, and then you sit on a bench and you start to roll it along, and it immediately starts flopping off and dripping on the floor. That's, you know, and you kind of go, And then you eventually master the art of keeping your left hand, making it roll perfectly evenly so that it doesn't, if you stop for a moment, it starts to sag, and then you start to roll it, and you can let the high side sag back down, and get it even. But just what bogs you down is the technique. Technique is not cheap in this particular field, and you have to have a skill set, and that takes a while. And even after 30 years of making glass, I still get bitten severely by simple errors every single day. I will have a vase that's quite beautiful, and we'll attach a bunty to it, and then I'll go to crack it off from the blowpipe, and it'll fall off both the bunty and the blowpipe and smash on the floor. But it definitely keeps you humble. It definitely lets you know that you are way not as cool as you think you are.